On the 27th of July 2012, the Olympic Park here in Stratford will throw open its doors and play host to the world's greatest sporting event, the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. During the Olympic Games themselves, which last 19 days, 7.6 million ticket holders will watch 17,000 athletes compete across 26 sports, with one common goal: to get as many gold medals for their country as possible. But the success of the Games goes far beyond just the medals. The Olympic Games is about creating a global spectacle, providing the athletes and spectators with state-of-the-art venues and top-class facilities, a lasting legacy for future generations, and crucially, for the team tasked with delivering the Games, it's about bringing this epic project together on time and on budget. My name's Michelle Livings, and in this short film, we'll be taking you behind the scenes to show you just what it takes to deliver the Olympics, courtesy of another winning team, one without who the Games simply wouldn't exist. We'll be speaking to some of the chartered surveyors who've played a vital role at every stage of the project. Their expertise, breadth of specialist knowledge and ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges have been vital to the success of the biggest construction project the United Kingdom has ever seen. Many of the hundreds of surveyors who have been involved in the project are working for one of the three public bodies that have been set up to deliver the Games: the Olympic Delivery Authority, the ODA, the developer of the Olympic Park in Stratford, the London Operating Committee of the Olympic Games, or LOCOG, responsible for installing the temporary infrastructure and running the event, and the Olympic Park Legacy Company, OPLC, whose job it is to transform the park into a thriving new community after the Games have finished. The Olympic Games have been almost a decade in the making, and the first leg of this epic journey was to put together the Olympic bid, which of course culminated in that memorable night in Singapore back in 2005.
Well, I feel very privileged, and it's an extraordinary journey. I was right at the very beginning in terms of working with the London Development Agency, where I was a project executive, working in the land and master planning team. And the idea was being sponsored by the Mayor, Ken Livingstone in those days, for bidding for the Olympics. And it was very clear that a master plan and a venture planning permission was required to help the bid team.
Bids for games and staging games work best when a city realises that there's got to be more to it than that. It's very much a device to achieve some other longer-term goal. London had its priority of the East London regeneration, and there was an almost perfect alignment of the Olympic Games and that bigger vision.
So regardless of the outcome of the bid, it was a key regeneration area. So we were focusing on this area at the time. We had acquired assets within this area, and that in itself supported London's bid for the Games.
In terms of the bid, which I don't think in any other city they've had a bid with a planning permission, and therefore that was requested to go in the candidature file.
But it was also not just sort of wiping out everything that was there and trying to replace it with something new. So again, jumping back to sort of when the bid was approved to go in, one of the things that the Mayor made very clear as well at that time was it wasn't just a case of assembling the land. He wanted to make a commitment that everybody currently in occupation on that site, whether it was businesses, travellers, allotment holders, all of those people would be relocated and given a new home as close as possible to the site.
And then, of course, nearer the time at which we were going to bid, we needed to show that these weren't just virtual plans, they were real plans that we had for the venues that we're going to use for our games, in terms of what we're going to build in Olympic Park, that we had plans that were well developed, well thought through, and there was a business plan and legacy strategy behind them.
The International Olympic Committee has the honour of announcing that the Games of the 30th Olympiad in 2012 are awarded to the city of London.
We're all waiting for that moment, of course, when eventually Jacques Rogge, the president of the IOC, opened up that envelope and announced that the Games were coming to London. It was just quite incredible. You know, we were just blown away. I mean, in my head at that time, I kind of got the idea that he was going to say London. I couldn't imagine he would say any other word. So I was sort of already halfway up in the air by the time he started to say the word London. So, you know, absolutely incredible moment. Of course, the celebration just went on all through the night. So waking up the next morning was just that moment of realisation of, wow, we've got it, we're ready to go. And of course, in the role that I was in, it really was about then getting a head start straight away with the build works. Before we'd even known the results of the bid, we'd already worked through the transition plan from a bid company to an organising committee, what we would do for a transitionary Olympic Delivery Authority and how we would staff that and how we would make decisions to be able to keep the ball moving, as it were. It really has forced its decision making to happen in timescales which ordinarily would happen in 5, 10 years into a condensed period of just a few years. So take, for example, the CPO process, the planning application process. You know, biggest ever CPO on single site, biggest ever planning application for a single site, you know, biggest construction project in Europe. You know, the statistics are phenomenal, and to get that away in just a few years before they start building on site was a tremendous achievement, and really wouldn't probably be achieved in any other normal building project. But then you have the finite deadline, you have the eyes of the world on you in 2012, you can't fail.
So we bought the land in advance, started working up planning applications for new industrial developments so that we could have those ready to start building the minute the Games was won, because effectively July the 6th, the target for handing the site over to the Olympic Delivery Authority was July 2007. So from winning the bid to handing over the site, it was effectively 2 years to take through, from a standing start, the biggest regeneration compulsory purchase order that the country has seen. But not only doing that, finishing it, getting vacant possession, actually relocating everybody on the site as well.
We promoted 2 CPOs, one to acquire the land and another CPO to essentially relocate approximately 7 kilometres of overhead power lines that was present on site. We couldn't have delivered the infrastructure and the stadia with those power lines in place, so we took forward a CPO to acquire the land in order to underground those power lines.
Look at the land and come up with reasonable estimates of what they're going to cost. But the really big unknown in compulsory purchase, particularly with businesses, is the statutory compensation in and around the costs of moving, that are all valid claims, and all that the surveying firms can really do, and that sort of is really look at past experiences, look at what they've been involved in before.
You know, we employed business consultants to work with them to, you know, work and really analyse those businesses to, you know, really in many cases reorganise those businesses to ensure that they operated more profitably.
What was encouraging and a real privilege to be involved in is that the planning permissions were built. There are many permissions granted across the UK and London that never actually get built. And in this case, what I sometimes call the flash to bang was really immediate.
The sheer scale of this construction project was obvious, so from a surveying perspective, it was vital to devise a strategy that would ensure all foundations, buildings and stadia were completed to the highest construction and sustainability standards, all in an incredibly short time frame. Also included in this complicated mix was the handover of the project from the ODA to LOCOG to enable the construction of the 120 temporary facilities that were to complete the Olympic portfolio.
A lot of time was spent just understanding how we were going to deliver Olympic Park. Of course, that is our biggest build. It included a huge amount of additional infrastructure, remediation and so on. And we wanted to hit some really key targets around sustainability, around safety, around diversity, and just make sure that what we were building had an absolute legacy after the Games, so that these buildings were not left behind. So we had to work out the difference between what would be left in permanent, what would be left in temporary. So all of those things took a long time to work out.
I think it's been different to other projects because I think as a whole you've had this end date. I mean, even though a World Cup, you know, has to take place in a particular period, you're generally only looking at one building, you know, in a city. You know, it's a new stadium or it's a stadium refurbishment. I mean, here we had this, you know, £7 billion worth of construction in a congested part of London on a 270, hectare site. And the whole thing had to be built out and delivered, you know, in a 5-year period.
You name it, this programme and this project probably had every land use going for it, from a power station to a swimming pool to an electrical substation to decontamination of the significant amounts of ground and rivers, working with the Environment Agency there. So the mixture of meetings, a mixture of disciplines was quite fantastic, really.
I think it's a really unusual project for a surveyor to get involved in many ways. Whilst certain aspects of what we do are very familiar and it's very core to the world of construction, there are other aspects where actually a real creative mind is needed, and it's kind of very challenging from that point of view. It requires you to maybe put aside some of your maybe your stereotypical ways of delivering and so apply some creativity to get it done.
And these were big aspects that you wouldn't normally look at in any project. I've never considered before, how does the workforce get to the job? I've never had to. You know, they turn up on the tube, they turn up in their car and they park around the corner. When you've got an Olympic site, and you know, we had, when the village was under full pelt, we had up to 20,000 people a day coming and working on that site. So how do you get them in there? How do you get lorry loads of steel and materials coming into the east end of London without a complete gridlock occurring? So that was the real difference. So we looked at all the risks, we looked at all the interfaces and all the complexities, and we put some budgets against, you know, the individual items, so we split it back down. And then we just started to say, okay, what are we going to need to deal with that issue there? What are we going to need to deal with that issue there?
Biggest challenge is probably twofold. It's time was obviously a major factor, because despite the fact at the time you start with 6 years to go, the project's broken down into very small chunks. It's the only way you can do it, otherwise you'd probably get completely lost in the details.
So what we did was we split the project up into circa 40 or 50 projects to be able to, you know, look at this. So we had the stadium project, we had the undergrounding project, we had, you know, the aquatics project, etc. Each of those had project teams, each of those had their budget, each of those had their scope, and we were going through, you know, agreeing with them what that was going to be before we went to government in sort of November 2007 to get, you know, approval. But, you know, the work had already begun on site, and before then, you know, we were already out to tender.
The principal thing that the ODA and CLM, who I was initially engaged with, the delivery partner, did or chose to do was to work from a year out. So it wasn't building up to the 27th of July 2012, it was actually 27th of July 11. So that builds in naturally a year's buffer, because construction, I mean, it's been snowing obviously the last couple of days. That has an impact on running a project.
Normally you just look at the job, you know, how much is it going to cost to build? With this one you said, what are all these things that we're going to try to achieve? How much money are we going to need to set aside to actually make sure that we can achieve that?
Set a budget for something within which, or that allowed something else to happen. So if it was a basketball arena, for example, the requirements of what it was used for were the things that we used to drive our thinking about the budget, not any particular design. So we were looking at the size the thing needed to be, the height, the span, the conditions, players and spectators needed, all the equipment that the sport needed, and coming at it very much that way, rather than saying this needs to be an ABC made by 1, 2, 3.
Naturally, such an epic project provides a shop window for the excellence of a nation's construction industry. And this expertise comes with the ability to adapt to unforeseen circumstances. When the credit crunch hit hard back in 2008, private sector backing and lending from banks was at a premium, presenting a real challenge for surveyors.
So essentially what you had was a $4 billion cost that had a $2.3 billion Olympic budget element, a $1 billion Stratford infrastructure budget element, and an assumption that 700 million would actually come in from the private sector, through doing, PFI or PPP deals, particularly obviously on the village. So we were moving away from 4 billion. Now that 4 billion didn't include VAT, because the Exchequer hadn't made their mind up at that stage that VAT would or wouldn't be applicable, which they subsequently did. So there was, at the time, an immediate 17.5% increase. And the other thing that it didn't really have was it really didn't have the sort of contingency sums set aside to deal with, the building of an entire park.
2008/2009, when the market was crashing, people perceiving values as dropping, money got scarcer and scarcer, it got tighter and tighter, the conditions got more and more onerous. At the end of each week, you think you've done a deal, you open up the paper the following day and find something's gone wrong. I shall never forget, we thought long and hard about whether to carry on doing the Broadcast Centre Media Centre with a private developer. I gave a lot of thought over 1 week, recommended to the Chief Executive on a Friday evening that we pull the plug, we do it ourselves. What happened on the Saturday? Lehman's went bust.
Obviously the banking situation and just the whole meltdown that the world was going through at that point just made everybody either run away, or even if they weren't running away, there just wasn't the financial capability to be able to do it. So those projects had to be brought on board as ODA publicly funded projects.
But we decided very early on that partly because of other public projects had gone over budget and not enough care and thought and attention given to the initial budget, that we would do a thorough review and make sure we got a healthy budget with contingencies. You've got to also bear in mind that at the time that was done, the economy was in a very good state. We were worried about whether some of the contractors would actually want to risk their reputation on doing some of the jobs. Hence the reason why there were two forms of contingencies, one project and one what we call programme contingency, which was controlled by government. But at the end of the day, we are currently predicting we will bring this in at 6.7. Now, that does seem to be an awful lot of saving, but it's a good job we had the bigger budget, because as we're seeing for things like security and other issues that were not budgeted for, that contingency was there.
A lot went into making up the total approximate £9 billion forecasted budget, so we thought we'd share a few financial highlights of the process to date. The original purchase of the Olympic Park land by LDA came in at £766 million. The venues equalled £1.076 billion. Transport came in at £857 million. Park-wide projects reached £936 million. And the Media Centre and Olympic Village totalled £1.215 billion. And finally, site infrastructure and build came in at £1.809 billion. LOCOG's budget for staging the Games is now £2.164 billion. The Olympic Legacy project will reach £826 million. So, with most of the budget spent, what have the next 6 months got in store for this year's Olympic Games?
Well, of course, the Olympic Park side, if you'd looked at it 6 or 7 years ago, I mean, it's unrecognisable from what it is today. 400 buildings across the site. There was 52 power lines carrying the power cables. A lot of those waterways and the nature reserves and so on were very contaminated and overgrown and uncared for.
I was on site earlier this week, and I remember standing at where they said the 100-metre final would cross, and I can't remember, I think it was a garage of some sort. I can't remember what was there. It was, you just couldn't envisage it, and that was only 4 years ago. And now you have, finished venues and running test events and all the other things that are going on down there.
We thought very carefully about the placement and location of the arena, so you can get these great backdrop images of the arena and horses jumping and so on with the city as the backdrop. You get this fantastic image of horses jumping over the meridian line from east to west, with Canary Wharf in the background. Then we had Horse Guards Parade, which was in the centre of Whitehall. Extraordinary to develop something of that scale, a 15,000 seat beach volleyball arena in the middle of Whitehall. So you get those great backdrop images to Whitehall, the London Eye in the background.
Well, I mean, for us, the next 6 months is critical because we've got a lot of work to do to erect the temporary venues. Success for me will be getting to games time in a satisfaction that we've built everything to the required specification on time. We know that the budget is okay, but also, most importantly, that it all happens safely.
So, when the athletes have packed up their kit bags and the spectators have headed home, what does the future hold for the iconic structures left behind? Well, a key element of the Olympic legacy was always to ensure that the permanent structures would go on to have an end use. So, for example, the stadium, the most sustainable Olympic stadium ever built, will continue as a sports and athletics venue, as well as playing host to cultural and community events. Clubs, schools and local residents will be able to swim in the pools of the aquatic centre. A velo park will be created alongside the velodrome, incorporating mountain bike and road cycle courses and workshop facilities which will serve the community and elite athletes alike. And the Olympic Village will include up to 5,000 new houses, including tenures, shared equity and housing for sale. And of course, sustainability has been a watchword for surveyors. Their expertise and innovative approach to the project has enabled 95% of waste to be diverted from landfill, 40,000 tonnes of CO2 to be saved from transport emissions alone, and ultimately the transformation of a piece of contaminated land into the spectacular site we see today. As for London itself, as we heard earlier, the Olympic project was first and foremost an urban regeneration venture. The vision for this area of East London has always been to create a thriving community for residents and businesses, better housing and fantastic sporting facilities.
The Games are being hosted in one of the most deprived parts of London and indeed the country. So really we see this as an opportunity to capitalise on that investment and ensure that existing communities and new communities benefit from the investment in the Games. We've got fantastic open parkland, fantastic venues which again local people will have the use of and the benefit of.
We've been master planning for new communities, sustainable, predominantly residential communities, and looking at family homes, a proportion which is much higher than has been traditionally being developed in London, and a really exciting neighbourhood with the location, with the history of the Games, the co-location with the Westfield Shopping Centre and the previous Athletes Village.
Delancey and Godari Deer are planning to let the homes and not sell them, which will be a first for this country in terms of the scale, this size. But again, what isn't necessarily appreciated is that a part of the planning permissions we've got and part of the deal we've done is that they have the ability after the Games and over time to build another 2,000 homes. So in total you're going to get nearly 5,000 homes there, plus those that can be built in Westfield and plus those in the park. So you are creating a massive new community.
The key behind this was always the vision about regeneration in a way that's never really been able to be achieved before in the UK, because we had the impetus of the Olympics behind us and the spotlight of the world looking at that part of London at the time, it gave us the opportunity to do something very unique and special.
I think one of the things there is you can see that that's going to make a real change, a real difference to people's lives. I mean, it's not just an office block or it's not just a factory. You know, this is something that could fundamentally improve people's lives in the future in London, and and change the look of London. I think that's exciting.
Thomas Edison said, "There's got to be a better way, find it." So innovation was about doing things better and doing things different, and that's just what happened in the Olympics.
I think there's a huge learning legacy from what we've done here. A lot of people have been involved and would have learned and contributed a huge amount. I think we would have made some change as well. I think there's a real skill base in this country that will exist after the Games that I think will serve us well for future major projects and future events. I think we probably would have changed the way in which certain things are done around the delivery of events, which hopefully others will be able to learn around, whether it's in relation to the sustainability programme or our health and safety objectives or any other aspect of our programme. I think it's all about the learning legacy, and I think the surveying profession, the UK construction industry and everybody that's involved in that, I think will benefit from everything that's happened around the Games.
There's going to be quite significant estates management role across those properties, both on an individual building scale and at a park-wide scale. So I think the construction side, the property and agency side and the management side of the profession, there's going to be opportunities in the Olympic Park for years to come.
So success to me looks like that it's absolutely recognised across the world. It's a desired place to come. It's, as I've said to some of the American investors, that it's Stratford that you're coming to visit, not Stratford-upon-Avon, Stratford, East London. So yeah, E20 is on the map.
The London 2012 Olympics has already had a major impact on the future of the Games in other countries, and what surveyors have done here has helped to shape the way in which future events are planned, built and delivered. With the legacy playing such an important role in the London bid, the IOC have integrated the socio-economic benefits of awarding the Games to a city into their selection process. This of course bodes very well for Rio, where the winning team of chartered surveyors will be heading next. So from what we've heard, it's clear to see that chartered surveyors have left a lasting legacy of their own, and one that helped turn the Olympic dream into a reality and secure the long-term success of the 2012 London Olympic and Paralympic Games.